Imagine opening your eyes for the very first time. You have no control over where you were born, no control over when you were born. Your entire life depends on a single moment in history. Perhaps you wake up in the freezing wilderness of the Ice Age, where every sunrise is a fight against hunger, predators, and deadly cold. Or maybe you are born during the Black Death, when invisible disease spreads faster than anyone can understand, wiping out entire families in just days. Perhaps your childhood begins during World War II, where the sound of explosions replaces the sound of birds, and survival becomes your only goal. History is filled with moments that tested humanity beyond imagination. But one question remains. If you had to live through only one of these eras, which would give you the best chance of survival, and which would almost certainly become your last? Let's travel through time and find out. Your journey begins around 20,000 years ago, during the last Ice Age. The world is almost unrecognizable. Massive glaciers cover huge parts of the Earth. Temperatures are far colder than today, and every sunrise brings a new struggle to survive. There are no cities, no farms, and no supermarkets. Every meal must be hunted, gathered, or fought for. But the freezing cold isn't your only enemy. Across the frozen landscape roam giant predators, saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, cave lions, and enormous bears. One mistake could cost you your life. Even finding clean water isn't simple. Rivers freeze solid, edible plants are scarce, and hunting often means chasing dangerous animals like mammoths or bison with nothing more than wooden spears. Most people don't die from old age. They die from hunger, injuries, infections, or the brutal winter itself. Yet despite these impossible conditions, our ancestors survived. If they hadn't, none of us would be here today. But as deadly as the Ice Age was, an even more terrifying era was still waiting for humanity. As the Ice Age came to an end, the world became warmer. For the first time, humans began building permanent villages. Crops were planted, animals were domesticated, and civilizations slowly emerged. On the surface, life seemed to be getting easier. But a new kind of danger had arrived. People no longer had to fear only nature. They now had to fear each other. Land became valuable. Food could be stored. Wealth could be stolen. Entire kingdoms rose by conquering their neighbors, and war became a permanent part of human life. Weapons evolved from sharpened stone to bronze swords, iron spears, and powerful bows. Cities were surrounded by walls, but walls could be broken. Families could lose everything in a single invasion. Disease also spread more easily than ever before. Living close together meant bacteria and viruses could move rapidly through growing populations, while poor sanitation made deadly outbreaks increasingly common. Humanity had built civilization, but civilization had also created new ways to suffer. And soon, one invisible enemy would kill more people than any army ever could. Now imagine waking up in Europe in the year 1348. At first, everything seems normal. Then someone in your village falls sick. A fever, painful black swellings. Within days, they're dead. Soon, another neighbor dies. Then another. No one understands what's happening. There are no antibiotics, no hospitals capable of stopping it, and no knowledge of bacteria. People desperately search for answers, believing the disease is a punishment from God or the result of poisoned air. But the real enemy is everywhere. Tiny fleas carried by rats spread one of the deadliest pandemics in human history, the Black Death. Entire families disappear within a week. Streets fall silent. Farms are abandoned because there is no one left to work them. In many towns, the dead outnumber the living, and mass graves become the only way to bury the victims. Historians estimate that between 30% and 50% of Europe's population died in just a few years. If you were born during this time, survival depended less on strength and more on pure luck. But as horrifying as the plague was, the modern age would introduce a new kind of nightmare, one created by humanity itself. Now, the year is 1942. You are no longer fighting nature. You are fighting other humans. Across Europe, Asia, and the Pacific, the world has become a battlefield. Cities that once buzzed with life are reduced to rubble overnight. Air raid sirens interrupt sleep, and every distant engine in the sky could mean another bombing run. Food is rationed. Clean water is scarce. Millions of families are forced to leave everything behind, becoming refugees with nowhere safe to go. For soldiers, survival depends on courage, training, and luck. For civilians, it depends on something even more unpredictable, whether the next bomb falls on your street. By the time the war ends in 1945, more than 70 million people have lost their lives, making it the deadliest conflict in human history. Technology had advanced further than ever before. Yet instead of making life safer, it had made war more destructive than humanity had ever imagined. But surprisingly, even this wasn't necessarily the hardest era in which to stay alive. But what if the hardest time to be alive wasn't defined by war or by plague? What if it was simply the era in which you were born? For most of human history, childhood itself was the greatest threat to survival. Thousands of years ago, many children never reached their 5th birthday. A simple infection could become a death sentence. A minor cut could turn deadly. Clean drinking water was rare, vaccines didn't exist, and even a common fever could take a life within days. Parents often had many children, not because life was easier, but because they knew some of them might never grow up. Average life expectancy was shockingly low, not because everyone died at 30, but because so many died in infancy or early childhood. If you survived those dangerous early years, you had a much better chance of living a long life. In many ancient societies, the greatest battle wasn't surviving adulthood, it was surviving childhood. So, after traveling through thousands of years of human history, which era was truly the hardest to survive? The answer isn't as simple as choosing one. The Ice Age challenged your body. The Black Death threatened you with an invisible killer. World War II surrounded you with violence on a global scale. And for most of history, simply being born was one of the greatest risks you could face. Each era had its own nightmare. But if survival meant staying alive from birth to old age, the evidence points toward the distant past. Before modern medicine, clean water, sanitation, and vaccines, everyday life was filled with dangers we rarely think about today. A tooth infection, a contaminated well, or a minor injury could end a life. Our ancestors didn't survive because life was easier. They survived because they adapted, endured, and kept moving forward against incredible odds. And that raises one final question. Are we actually living in the safest time in human history? It's easy to imagine that life in the past was simpler. No emails, no traffic, no social media, just nature and freedom. But that's only part of the story. For most of human history, every single day came with risks that modern people rarely experience. Hunger wasn't an inconvenience. It was a real possibility. A small infection could become fatal. There were no emergency services, no antibiotics, and no guarantee that tomorrow would come. Today, many of us worry about deadlines, notifications, and stress. Our ancestors worried about surviving the night. That doesn't mean modern life is perfect. In fact, our biggest challenges have changed. Instead of fighting predators, we often fight anxiety. Instead of searching for food, we struggle with overconsumption. The dangers may look different, but the human instinct to survive has never disappeared. And that's exactly why the final answer might surprise you. So, what was the hardest age to be alive? The truth is, there isn't one perfect answer. Every era challenged humanity in a different way. The Ice Age tested endurance. Ancient civilizations brought war and disease. The Black Death showed how powerless people could be against an invisible enemy. World War II revealed how devastating human conflict could become. And yet, through every disaster, every famine, every pandemic, and every war, humanity survived. Not because our ancestors were fearless, not because they were stronger than everyone else, but because they adapted, they learned, they worked together, and they refused to give up. Today, we live longer, healthier, and safer lives than almost anyone in history could have imagined. The struggles we face are different, but the resilience that carried our species through thousands of generations still lives inside every one of us. The next time life feels difficult, remember this. You are the descendant of people who survived ice ages, deadly plagues, world wars, and countless challenges that history has forgotten. Their greatest victory is that you're here today,